Changing font size is a foundational concept of CSS. So let's take a look to see how we can change the font size, and let's take a look at the different size units that we have available to us. So by default, most browsers will specify a default font value of about 16 pixels. But most of the time, or in many cases, that's not exactly what you want. So to change the font size in CSS, all we have to do is select the tag, and then we have to specify the font size property. So let's say we want to change the size of all these p tags from 16 pixels to 20 pixels. So we'll select the p tag, and then we'll specify the font size property just like that, and then we can just type in the value in pixels. So we'll say 20 pixels, and we'll go ahead and save that. And you can see over here that these three p tags have changed their size from 16 pixels, which is the browser's default, to 20 pixels. Now what exactly is this px right here at the end of this 20? Well, this is the pixel unit that you're specifying as the size unit. So there are many different units in CSS, just like there are many different units in real life, like inches, feet, meters, stuff like that. They're measured in units. So a pixel unit is going to specify how many pixels tall a piece of text is. So this glyph right here is 20 pixel units from the very bottom of it to the very top of it. And that's what we are changing whenever we are specifying the font size, is the height of the unit. Now a pixel unit is what we call an absolute unit, meaning no matter what happens around it, no matter what happens to the tags that it's in, the font size is always going to stay the same regardless of what happens around it. And that's why we call it absolute, because you're specifying the actual value that you want it to always display. And a lot of times we use these absolute units for baseline values, meaning we start at this specific point and then we can change things around it based on that starting point. So many times you'll see someone do this. We'll select the HTML tag, and then we'll change the font size from the 16 pixels default to, let's say, a font size of 20 pixels, and that will change the entire application around that baseline value. So we set this baseline of 20 pixels here, but this header tag here is still obviously much bigger than this text down here inside of these paragraph tags. What in the world is going on with the header tags? Well, this is whenever we get into relatively sized units. Relatively sized units are units that are going to change based on the size of things around it. So if we take this h1 tag for an example, h1 tags are by default 2 times the size of its parent element's font size. So the parent element of this h1 tag is of course the body tag, and the body tag has inherited the font size of 20 pixels from the HTML tag. This h1 tag is now 40 pixels in size. So the two main relatively sized units for font size that we want to worry about are the EM values and the REM values. So the EM value is going to be relative to the parent element. So it doesn't matter what other things are above the parent element, around the parent element. All it cares about is the size relative to the parent element. Whereas the REM value is relative to the root element, or the HTML element. So let's say that I want to make this div tag right here 14 pixels. So we'll go ahead and select the div tag, and we will set the font size to 14 pixels, just like that. And you can already see that these p tags here have changed their size. So let's say that I want to make those p tags 90% of the size of the parent element, the div tag. So on the div tag, we've specified that it's 14 pixels for the font size. So if I want to change those p tags size to 90% of the size of the div, I can select the div, and then I can select the p tags inside of it, and we can set the font size on those to 0.9 EM. Just like that. And that's basically saying set it to 90% the size, so 0.9 the size of the parent element. So whenever I save that, you're going to see not much of a change. You can definitely see that it has gotten smaller. So if I wanted to make a much more drastic change, we could say I want to make it 300% of the parent size. So that would be 3 EM. And if I save that, you can see that it is massive. It has tripled the size of the 14 pixel size that we have initially set on the parent. This size is only being derived from this. It's not being derived from this. And that's simply because we are using the EM values. Now the rem values, or REM values, are derived from the root element rather than just the parent. So if I would specify an REM value on this, it's going to get bigger, because instead of now it being derived from the parent, which is set at 14 pixels, it's going to be derived from the root element of the HTML. The HTML is the root element. It's going to derive its size from the font size of the root element, which is set at 20 pixels. So if I save that, you can see it's got it even bigger. So 3 REM is 3 times this size. So if I were to set the font size to 60 pixels, you wouldn't see a change, because that's the size that the 3 REM value has calculated. And this is how you can make your application scalable, because if I change this back to a 3 REM value, and if I want to, let's say, just change it down to 19 pixels as the root value, maybe the site has changed or whatever, and now the appropriate default value on the HTML tag is going to be 19 pixels. So if I save that, you can see everything has gotten smaller, because this has derived its 3 REM value from that 19 pixels now rather than that 20. And that is how you can change your font size and some of the basic absolute and relatively sized units. There are many more absolute and relatively sized units that you do have available, but these are generally the ones that most people use. So if you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.